Anyone?
So I guess I'll go. Do you have any like maybe like a general example of how the state associations might look if this resolution is to pass?
Definitely. So the state associations themselves are not really changing at all because they are separate entities from SACUR and NCUR. Instead, it's more the relationship with SACUR. So instead of having representatives in boardroom and having their own state director boardroom, that will no longer cease to exist, along with the state bar pins that have the links, and then SBD, kind of like how we have NCC pins and NIHH pins as well. Gavin, do you have more to add on that?
Yeah, I was just going to also include the fact that like state associations won't necessarily have to change, but we feel that we have been limiting people. We feel like we've been limiting people because we ended up having to have, like each state ended up having to have a state director. And so in order to make sure that that state had voting rights, like they had to have a state director. But for instance, what if, like, I know, for instance, the one that I've talked to recently, SCORE, they wanted to end up moving to more of a conference model where the NCCs are the ones that they get together and they say, okay, like, let's look at all these bids and let's figure out like where the next one will be, like the next conference will be. And so SCORE is just the example that I had personally talked to, but like Mississippi's hasn't been doing too hot here recently. Alabama hasn't been, well, I just got the stank eye from Meg. But like their state associations and their conferences haven't been, you know, doing so well here recently. And so we just felt like it was limiting in the fact that we didn't want to force them to have a state director if they didn't feel like that was in their model.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Also, on the flip side of that, with the whole with Alabama and with smaller states, a lot of those schools that do affiliate with their states do not also affiliate with SACUR and NCUR. So it's sometimes hard for them to get a representative to come to conferences. For example, I know the current ALER director, his school is affiliated with SACUR and NCUR, but they don't travel to conferences as much. So it's hard, and it's kind of an extra expectation for the director, especially for a lot of schools. So it's kind of hindering those smaller schools that want to get involved on their state level. Are there any other questions? We really do want to make sure we answer all of your questions as thoroughly as possible. If there's no questions, we'd also, oh, just kidding, Zach Martin.
There we go. Sorry, it like wasn't unmuting. So what is something that you foresee that could be a like problem for the states moving forward if this resolution were to pass?
Something we could see as a problem for the state associations. Personally, I could definitely see a concern being the state associations don't have an extra layer holding them accountable. While SACUR can't technically hold them accountable, it's kind of an expectation that the states have a director, they have a conference, and they show up to the region and are prepared to do business. However, if a state chooses to not have a conference or to move away from that model, they may be doing what's best for their own institutions. And so while that may be a problem, it might be what's needed for a couple years for their state.
Thank you.
Gavin?
Yeah, and I just want to tack on to that because I guess, oh, okay. Yeah, so like not much will really change on the state association level. But like, for instance, my position is like, I mean, half of my position is state associations. And so we really wanted to consider that. But if we move this, like with the idea that we're proposing, it might be more of the fact that this position moves to a special projects kind of position. And states, like, you would end up like, if we still needed like a central location for directors to meet or to exchange ideas, like this position could still hold that place, but it just wouldn't necessarily be like they own their own boardroom. for voting and stuff. So.
Yes, Zach?
Okay, so what is the process moving forward of like, so we have this chat and then you said it's like sent to the NBD and then I kind of like, you were cutting it out so I kind of missed what came after that for Gavin, but also from like the NACUR reps, like what is the process from moving forward? Like what comes after this? Like what happens, I guess?
Oh. Yeah, definitely. No, so we will take all of the feedback and concerns and conversation pieces we've gotten here, and we will take them back to the people who are actually drafting the piece of legislation, and they will consider that, and whatever the resolution that comes out of it, because it has not been written yet, will then be presented in an NBD chat. And what an NBD chat is the director and the ADBA or equivalent in every region, or ADAF since we're all transitioning to that name, in every region sit on the NBD. And it's just a piece of legislation. Well, it's a resolution, but it's presented like legislation is during a chat, kind of like at No Frills. And the directors and the ADs talk and vote. And they can explain more on that aspect for sure.
You want me to go now, Meg?
Go ahead.
Alrighty. So I think for those of you who don't know, I currently serve as the NACUR chairperson. So my role right now is to kind of clarify questions for people in general in regards to this topic. But to kind of touch on your question, Zach, the current role of NACUR and the current structure, as well as how we interact with state associations, hasn't changed from its inception, and is currently that like we don't recognize state associations. So in doing this resolution, I want to clarify a specific point about the resolution. It's to clarify NACUR's stance on it and provide more language around it. NACUR currently recognizes each individual institution as having a stake and a claim to being members of NACUR and having a vote, and we recognize the chartered regions of NACUR as the official breakdown of how we kind of divide out NACUR in our areas. So I want to make sure it's clear that whether or not the resolution passes or not, NACUR's stance on states doesn't change and hasn't changed, and that there are potential actions, I think, moving forward that we have to look at from a liability standpoint as a corporation and as an organization, in making changes and in holding the South Atlantic accountable to the NACUR organization for those changes. So the resolution is really a benefit to help people understand the process and help people understand what is changing. And it isn't that we don't see value in state associations or that we don't see value in the leadership opportunities that are provided to state conferences and the students who attend these organizations and serve on their executive boards. It is more so that like NACUR is looking from a holistic viewpoint of like our organization and getting our house in line, as well as, ensuring that we're covering our liability shield and that we're making sure that we are doing our due diligence as an organization to ensure that those who have paid dues to be members of the organization are given that opportunity. I want to throw that out there, but I think I touched on your question, but let me know if you want more information around the specific question you had.
Yes, Zach.
Okay, so just to follow up to that, thank you pretty much for clarifying somewhat. You did answer my question. But something that was stressed at No Frills and that's being stressed here is liability. So I'm just trying to understand what exactly you mean by liability. Like, what does that liability look like, and like, how does that apply to like me as a state director? Like my liability to you, I guess.
Meg, do you just want me to go? Okay. So when we talk about liability, we talk about it in a couple different ways. There's liability for like physical, like liability, cash liability, I guess you could say, in another term, which is if we, it's implied that, let's say, for instance, as a state director, we hold the space for you to come to our conference. We have a reciprocal space at your conference for our director. And, we cover the costs for your business at our conferences. We're essentially extending ourselves and saying that we're supporting and condoning the actions of this organization. And there is a potential liability in student, like people being able to connect the state association. So, NACAR or NCAR, or any of the state associations. I don't know how y'all pronounce it. I don't know the acronyms. But connecting the dots and carrying that up through, and there's enough there from a legal standpoint to be able to connect from the state association back to SACUR, back to NACUR, and go after the big potatoes and what's left in NACUR in some ways, and go after the liability there. That's the one realm of liability. The other side of it is that from a standpoint as an organization, like we have a responsibility we are responsible for the people who attend our conferences, and it's a shared liability between our institutions and the region or NACUR in general. And so we are shoring up those liabilities, and that when we bring people from other places or other organizations, like that increases that liability drastically in terms of what that looks like and how they're attending the conferences. And it's less of the institution taking on the liability and NACUR, it's the institution plus the state association plus NACUR. And if something were to happen, who's responsible for what, where, and when, and that's where we're clarifying that. And this is a recommendation from our organization. If we put money towards something and say, we have money on state associations, or we have money by reserving a spot or holding a spot at a conference, or compensating a spot at a conference for you, that directly ties us to in a legal sense condoning actions of. So then we therefore become responsible for the actions of that organization. I don't know if Jacob had any other thing he wanted to add to that as well.
Not particularly on liability, but mainly you kind of touched on conferences in themselves. Right now, it's kind of an expectation of schools that bid to host for conferences in the South Atlantic to have provide those meeting spaces for all of those state breakouts. And as of now, that kind of teeters on a little bit of the equity side of things on NACUR's level, just because a school that may be prohibited in hosting because of space limitations may be perceived negatively as a result of that. So really just looking into making sure that everything's kind of fair across the board regarding not necessarily requiring them to pay and hold spaces for those rooms. That's all.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to both of you for clarifying that, because I was a little confused on like the liability issue and that had been touched on. So it's definitely a lot more clear now. So I appreciate that.
Definitely. Any other questions?
I think there's also another thing I can share with you all in terms of from NACUR's perspective. So to help clarify kind of what this looks like. So as NACUR, you have an individual institution who pays for affiliation and to be represented at NACUR and at SACUR. So currently, if you have what's going on right now is you'd have a state director boardroom that's making decisions on behalf of SACUR and is not necessarily representing all the institutions who are affiliated in SACUR and representing some institutions who are not affiliated with SACUR but are with those state associations. And it also does something where, correct me if I'm wrong in the number of schools, but I'm just using a guesstimate from what I remember from last time, but you have Florida, which has, 30 institutions or something like that. I think it's 20.
20-ish, yeah.
So you have Florida that has 20 institutions and one state director, and then you have, Mississippi. And so I think the discrepancy there is you're giving 4 votes, 1 voice, and you're giving 20 votes, 1 voice. And so when we pride ourselves on trying to stake an equal claim in the organization for every member, and we try as best as possible with geographic boundaries to stake our regions out that way as well. And so I think that's where some of the other things come through is that like when we have so many institutions, or when we're taking away that opportunity to be represented by the institution, and foregoing and giving that to a state director, which is not necessarily a representation of that institution in some capacities. And so that's kind of where some of this comes from too, is that like, then you have this additional group voting on behalf of, and we just cross a lot of lines that we're not really ready, or we're not able to cross, and we don't want to have to try to figure out what that means,
Thank you for that. Daniel?
Hey, Meg. We're over here. There's a couple of us here at Western. And I think we understand the implications of this when it comes to boardroom and speaking and voting rights and things like that. I think our question more so stems on, would there still be time allotted for state breakouts? And if I missed that during what Nathan was mentioning, I apologize. But would there be time allotted at a SACUR conference or no frills or those types of conferences for a CAR to assemble and to provide updates on their conference and things like that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go in on that one. The state breakout stuff has kind of been, we've kind of had back and forth discussions about it. But so like Jacob said earlier, providing the space for all of those is, like, we just want to make sure that, like, a conference host that may be a smaller institution but can still host everybody does not get docked for, maybe not being able to provide those spaces for the state breakouts. But there's been a couple, like, right now that one's still being talked about. As of right now, I think that if we allow them to do business at our conference, then essentially, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, but, like, essentially we're allowing that, we're, like, condoning, like, we're essentially taking on that liability again. And so that's where we're kind of at with that right now. But like I said, like, that's been in discussion because this has been, like, one of the points that we can't come to terms on, is because we're like, we understand, like, the states need to have that conference update time, but then again, it's also a liability for NACUR. And so we're trying to find a good happy medium on that. Because, like, for instance, like, we do have to do separate lunches. So, like, but, like, on the flip side of that, like, if we didn't do state breakouts, what would we do? And so I know that the one that Danielle had suggested to me was us doing philanthropy for, like, the event that we had sponsored that year. So there are other options that we could do with that state breakout time. But like I said, that's one of the points that we've been really back and forth on. So
to touch
good.
what Gavin was talking about, yes, I think it is that implied liability in regards to, like, having official business happen at a SACUR conference would then condone essentially what that is. And I'll reiterate this again. It is not that we don't see state associations as valuable. What did I just say there? Valuable, or as something that we want our students to participate in. It's more so along the lines of, like, is this something that we can take on as a risk and responsibility for NACUR? And at the current time and the current past and what has been for the previous 60 years, it is the answer right now is we can't. And so it isn't that there couldn't be informal meetings. We obviously can't stop if there's a state director and there's some other members of a state at the conference and they happen to want to sit together at lunch, or, like, they have free time at the conference and they want to have an informal gathering. Like, we're not really going to be able to stop that from happening. But the answer to the question is no, we wouldn't necessarily reserve space to hold all of those breakouts and to do all those things to have official business. Meg and I have talked a lot, as well as the rest of the exec team, with the SEC about what that looks like as a transition period, as well as what that looks like kind of working through some of the changes, because there are things like Gavin talked about having a split lunch to accommodate the number of people who typically attend the conference, as well as have roll call by state and different things like that. So establishing what that looks like is obviously going to take some time, and it's something that we are going to have to work through. But I don't think it's something that's not manageable or doable, as we have there's different means of trying different options. So.
Zach.
Awesome. So just to kind of get more of a timeline, so you said that this would be brought at NACUR, this NACUR coming up, correct?
It will be brought up before NACUR, yes.
Okay. And then once the resolution, like, whatever happens to it, if it were to be passed, it will be, like, a year to adjust. Okay, so then, like, NACUR 2017 is when like everything would go into effect of like the relationship evaluation.
So how it works is that year is to make the necessary changes. And for example, getting rid of state director boardroom, getting rid of state director votes, or whatever the stipulations are. However, that doesn't mean that it doesn't go into effect. That just means that you have a year to go through the proper procedures, to draft the proper legislation for, I knew I was talking about, legislation for your policy book, because we do definitely respect the fact that it's in our policy book and our governing documents, and that we don't want to just be like, nah, you can get rid of that. That's not fair. Nate?
I want to provide clarity in that it's not necessarily that it goes into effect or that it doesn't. And this is where it's tricky, is that NACUR's, and I will take ownership on this, is that NACUR's stance has not changed on state associations, and so technically at the current pass, NACUR is out of NACUR policy in regards to how it interacts with state associations. So I will give you an example. State director boardroom votes on awards. Those awards, because not voted on by a constituency of the South Atlantic and voted on by state director boardroom, technically are not considered regional affiliates in the grand scheme of things of NACUR. As of right now, we've chosen to make this an opportunity to make changes, as opposed to just put an affront to it and like not allow those to continue. And so the purpose behind the resolution was really out of a conversation. Is like a resolution is designed to add clarity and to provide an official stance and give more instruction, but not necessarily add policy. The policy exists in regards to giving institution votes and what that looks like and how that goes forth. The purpose to add a resolution about state associations is to give clarity on little minute details and different things. So, it would say something along the lines of like, NACUR recognizes and values state associations, NACUR, like business, we recognize that they're like business to be done with both entities that impact the same student leaders in some ways. And so it would speak through some of those points to clarify that like NACUR and state associations business don't overlap, but don't necessarily intersect and affect one another. And so we would allow for a grace period, and I think that the process is a conversation with the new exec team, the current exec team, as well as the current SEC and the incoming SEC, what those changes look like over time. And I think there will be things that will be discussed throughout. I would say that there's not a conscious timeline right now, if that makes any sense. But yes, and from the resolution side, the idea is that it would be brought forth prior to NACUR to establish that clarity so that it takes effect at NACUR, so that can be to ease the minds of some people, so that is given and written.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we really do want your discussion points and your concerns and everything else as well. So if you have one of those, please definitely let us know. You can let us know now, or you can let us know later. We prefer now because we're all here.
No one else listens. I just want to say thank you all for being here and providing this time for us to come ask questions and have feedback as well. It was really wonderful to actually kind of meet the NACUR chair, even though it is via technology, and as well see everyone else again. So thank you from NACUR, thank you from me for helping us and like allowing us to like have this conversation and provide the feedback that we are able to provide, I guess. So, yeah.
Definitely. We really definitely wanted to have the time to get the feedback from everyone. And so if you have feedback, please let us know. We definitely, from the SECUR SEC side, we definitely want to have the best interests of our region at heart. Nate?
So I offered this for the last state affiliation or state association chat as well. From the NACUR standpoint, I want to make it very clear, that we recognize this is a very challenging topic for the South Atlantic in particular. and it's something that we take very seriously, as well as like wanting to work with you all to establish something that works for your region and works for NACUR within the bounds that have been set. And so we think having open dialogue and conversations around this, and it's not a conversation that's ever finished or complete, and I think it's something that we are always looking for feedback from individuals, and I will put it out there that myself, as well as the rest of the executives, are open to any line of communication that you would like to have with us. If you feel you have a question or need something, you're more than welcome to reach out to us, and you can find that contact information on the NACUR website. But I think that this is a very important conversation and a very positive conversation and a positive step for the South Atlantic moving forward. And in conversations that I have with Meg during one-on-ones, I do feel that the South Atlantic is moving in a really good direction. And I think helping to clarify and to rework some of these things are beneficial for the organization. And I kind of feel like I have to apologize on behalf of NACUR in that we have let some of this spiral out of control, and some of you are facing some of those things that should have not happened in the first place. And so I think that that's from the NACUR standpoint, that's a failure on our part. And so recognizing that failure and working to like correct that and make good on that is important to us. So I just want to put that out there. And if you have anything, please let us know.
Definitely. Thank you, Nate. Gavin.
Withdraw.
Zach.
Awesome. Sorry, I feel like I'm kind of like dominating the conversation. I'm trying not to, but no one else doesn't really say anything. But I feel like this was extremely informative, even though we didn't really like go super deep into detail. But I feel like I understand a lot better now of like what exactly we want to do as like a state, but also like what NACUR wants to do and like how they want NACUR to move forward. So like I said, thank you all for being here, but also I feel a lot more confident in knowing that like I can take my state and I can make the adjustments I need to make and we're going to be fine. Like not to say like we wouldn't be fine either way. I don't know. But I think you get what I'm saying, that like we can move forward from this. And again, like I appreciate this conversation. I think it's wonderful that we can talk about this. And I think, like you said, that it was kind of like something spiraled out of control a little bit and no one really understood what exactly was going on. And there was a lot of like quick reaction to like what was being said, and no one really took the time to process and think about, okay, well, how is this really affecting us? Sorry, I just saw Nala and it made me laugh. But I definitely feel like a lot more confident now, knowing that like knowing the information I know, I guess. I don't know how to like put it into words. So I guess that's all that I really have to say. But thanks anyway.
Definitely. Thank you so much for taking time out of your probably very busy schedules, because all of y'all are student leaders or professional people and that are doing real kid jobs, as I say. But no, we want to make sure that we hear everyone's voices. So if you leave this chat and have questions, concerns, comments, like Nate said, do not ever hesitate to reach out to myself or Gavin. We are more than willing to talk through anything that we possibly understand. And if we don't understand, we are more than willing to send you on to Nate or Jacob. Zach Martin.
Sorry, again, will this be sent out? So like, will the first chat be sent out as well as this one so we can like review?
Yes, they are going to be posted on the website and sent out tomorrow in the OTP. They take a while to like decompress or compress or technology from Zoom to my computer. So after the chat, they will magic and then they will exist.
All right, thank you.
No problem. If y'all, like I said, if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you again for taking your time out, and we definitely appreciate any and all feedback we get. But with that, y'all, there's nothing really else to talk about unless y'all have something y'all want to talk to us about. But if not, thank you for coming, and we will see you hopefully at NACUR.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye. Have a great day. Please stop licking me. It's annoying.
Bye, everybody.